On that note, please join me to welcome Professor Mutambara.
Thank you very much for that propaganda. Propaganda spreading over my name. Now, all I have to do is to respond to that excellent presentation we've had today. And I want to thank you, Dr. Ming, for that presentation. The summary of the response is to say Africans must not be reacting. We must be proactive. With respect to China, with respect to Europe, with respect to the Americans, we must be proactive. So what we want is a proactive African approach to the space agenda. So that when we engage with China, when we engage with the US, when we engage with the Europeans, we have a sense of what we want. And they respond to what we want, as opposed to us fitting into their little strategies. That's the summarized version of my response. The African must be proactive, the African must plan. The starting point with us as Africans is to say, do we really appreciate the importance of space? Why space? And then we assess our efforts so far. What have we done? What has been done at the AU? What's been done in SADC? What's been done in South Africa? Then we make a few remarks and comments on the China-Africa current activities. Then we move on to our major response to say what do we want? What is our idea of a space program as Africans? What we want as Africans? And then we structure a way forward. That's our discussion. That is the nature of our response today. Now, we need a lot of education, and Dr. Ming has already alluded to this. As Africans, we must understand that when we say space, when we say satellite, it has major applications to economic development, to addressing our socio-economic needs. There's potential impact to our governance. There's ways and means to improve our socio-economic conditions by leveraging satellite technology. There's impact in agriculture, the environment, mining, telecoms, broadcasting, education, commerce, and industrialization in general. Let us have a sense of understanding that the space agenda is in our collective African interests. Let us have a sense of understanding that we can improve the quality of our life by leveraging space. That is the starting point. And we can make sure we can have pursue what is called data democracy. Data democracy says, let's have equal access to information. With space, with satellite technology, we'll be able to have what we call equitable access to data, equitable use of data, and equitable benefits. Information about the weather, about climate, about terrain, about the environment, geotechnical, and mineralization. This is one very important area. You see, the problem is Africans, we're very rich in terms of natural resources, but we don't know where the minerals are. And we don't know the concentration of the minerals. And more importantly, we don't know how much is there. There's no sense of quantification of the asset underground. So we are selling our souls for a song. We're selling our minerals for cheap because we don't know what we have. If we use satellite technology, we'll be able to know how much in terms of diamonds, gold, platinum we have in South Africa, in Botswana, in Malawi, in Nigeria, and be able to negotiate better deals by using information, location, and concentration of natural resources. We can get that information from satellite technology. Quantification of the unmined asset. Before you give Anglo the claim, as South Africa, know the quantity of gold that is down underground. Before you give a claim to a private player on diamonds or platinum, as a government, have a sense of the quantity of the asset. We can do that using satellite technology. There are so many applications that we have for satellite technology, so we must understand that. In terms of wireless technologies, you see, when you go wireless, it is 10 times faster. It is 50% cheaper than landline networks. So satellite communication is more effective, it's more productive, and yet it is cheaper. So as Africans, we can benefit from that application of satellite technologies. We can use satellite in education, long-distance learning, surveillance, monitoring of illegal shipping, oil spills, environmental damage. Africans can participate in the construction of information infrastructure. He indicated it before. We must not only be consumers of information, we must be producers of information. We are sick and tired of being sick and tired of being consumers of knowledge. We want to be participants in the construction of knowledge, creators of knowledge, knowledge management, knowledge creation, and knowledge ownership. So as Africans, we want to be the creators of the knowledge about space. We want to design the satellite. We want to construct the satellite. That's what we're talking about in terms of our participation in the global information infrastructure. Okay? Of course, satellite, DSTV, Kwese, all that are possible applications we can use. Remote delivery of healthcare, and also using drones to deliver medicines. All those are possibilities we must understand as Africans. Now, you always worry, no, but maybe why don't we as Africans concentrate on HIV and AIDS? Why don't we concentrate on second generation technologies? Why don't we leave artificial intelligence and space to America, Japan, and China? We're too backward to benefit from high technology. I've got news for you. Sometimes our poverty, sometimes our lack of development, sometimes our lack of infrastructure is actually an opportunity to adopt high technologies. Better than China, better than Japan, better than America. Why? Because sometimes our lack of infrastructure makes it easier to adopt newer technologies, makes it cheaper to adopt newer technologies, more effective. So don't shy away from cloud computing, from quantum computing, from blockchain technologies, from nanotechnology. Don't shy away from satellite technologies. If you are clever, if you are creative, maybe it will be cheaper. Maybe it will be simpler to apply these things in Mpumalanga, in Cholocho, in Kumasi, in Dotito, than in New York. Think about the wireless technology, mobile banking. Where is global bank practice? Where is the best in terms of mobile banking? It's not China, it's not Japan, it's not America, it's Kenya, M-Pesa. It's Zimbabwe, EcoCash. There's nothing in America, there's nothing in Europe that is as good as EcoCash as a platform. There's nothing in America, nothing in Japan that is as effective as M-Pesa. Why? Because in Zimbabwe, we don't have enough brick and mortar banks. Because in Kenya, we don't have enough brick and mortar banks. Why would you bank on a phone when the bank is downstairs from your house? Why would you bank on a phone when the bank is next door? So out of necessity, because of our poverty, because of lack of infrastructure, we are the best in the world. M-Pesa, EcoCash, superstars because of poverty. I say this to say, don't shy away from high science. Don't shy away from satellite technologies, from the elements of the fourth industrial revolution. Maybe, just maybe, blockchain technologies, nanotechnologies, 3D computing, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, human augmentation, all these interesting technologies might be easier, cheaper, and more effective in poor Africa because of our poor infrastructure and our lack of development. Infrastructure sunk costs are there in Japan because they've invested in wires. They've got all the technologies we can leapfrog, we can jump. So that's what you must always remember as Africans, that we might actually be the place to adopt space science better than America, better than Europe. Okay? We want to see the transfer of technology from China to Africa. We want technology transfer. We want to share scientific and technological knowledge. We want to promote data democracy. We want to make sure we're working together with our colleagues. Remember, China was as poor as we are. They were able to move 400 million people out of poverty over 30 years. There are lessons for Africans. They are now the #2 economy in the world, from poverty to stardom. So maybe we can get there too. But we must understand how we can leverage and work with them, as has been explained. We must understand our efforts. The AU is working on a space program, which was adopted on the 31st of January 2016. Okay, but we're spending not enough in terms of our activities as Africans. Okay, you can see the numbers for Nigeria and so on. Okay, what we want immediately, satellite cooperation training, data sharing, technology demonstration, and solutions for African countries. And we want examples of how we can do it together with our colleagues from China. Okay? However, the starting point, Dr. Meng, before we talk to you, before we engage you, we must be clear about what we want ourselves. Before we engage Europe, before we engage the Americans, let us be clear about what we want as Africans. That's my major input today. What is it that we want about space? What is our agenda? We must be proactive as Africans. We should be having our own strategies, our own plans, and the Chinese must be responding to the African strategy. The Americans must be responding to the African strategy. The Europeans must be responding to the African agenda, not the other way around. That is the message we're pushing today. What do we want? Here's the message to America. Here's the message to China. We want a well-coordinated and integrated Africa space program. We don't want any bilateral deals. Dr. Ming, little South Africa, and I'll show you how you are little. We don't want bilateral deals between South Africa and China. South Africa is too small. No bilateral deals between China and Nigeria. Nigeria is too small. No to bilateral deals between Algeria and China. No, no, no. What we want is an AU approach to global partners. Let us approach you, China, as Africa. Approach you, America, as Africa. Approach you, Europe, as the African Union. That way, we can have economies of scale. That way, we can have an impact. That way, we don't get shortchanged. You get shortchanged if you go as little Botswana, little Zimbabwe, little South Africa. Shame on you, South Africa. You must go as Africa. You're not a brick. You don't qualify to be a brick. Sorry, my brothers. You are too small to be a brick. You must go as the African Union. Then you are a brick compared to Brazil, Russia, India, and China. As the African Union, then you can be a brick. Lead to South Africa. my favorite country. Emphasis must be on continental scale and impact. Economic impact, economies of scale. We must make sure our program is responsive to our social needs, our economic needs, our political and environmental needs. We define our needs as Africans. A needs-driven, responsible, peaceful. We don't want wars. Africans don't fight. We're not supposed to fight. Sometimes we do fight, but we don't want wars. We don't want a war-based space program. Ours should be about peace and development. A sustainable, globally competitive program. We want to compete with you, China. When we get our act together, we must compete with China. We must have a global ranking. South Africa must not seek a global ranking in South Africa. We must get a global ranking as the AU. And I'll show you that with that, we can actually be a proper player. And then, of course, we need a unified regulatory framework for the program. This is what we want as Africans. When we approach China, approach America, approach Europe, we present ideas such as these ones, setting out what we want. A pursuit for an indigenous space capability, a consolidated integrated African position, an indigenous African space program. And the policy objectives and principles will be the core building blocks of such a program. Okay. What is the way forward for the African? Let us be clear about the vision for that program. Then the policy framework of that program. Then, of course, the game plan, the strategy to achieving that vision. Then we emphasize continental integration, both economic and political. And remember, by the way, I've said it before, Minister, the problem we have is we want to be a president. 54 presidents. Why do we need 54 men and women to be president of a small place like Africa? They have one president, they're doing fine. Xi Jinping is doing fine. Donald Trump is doing fine. I hope so. We have 54 of these men. I'm a president of starving people. We want continental integration where there's one president in Africa. Ramaphosa will be Minister of Defense. Mnangagwa will be Minister of Local Government. Kagame will be Minister of Police. Are these African leaders ready? They're not serious. They pay lip service to continental integration. All I'm saying to you as Africans is that there's no such thing as a free lunch. If you're going to have a United States of Africa, we must give up on some elements of national sovereignty. Give up on your aspirations to be a president and have one in Africa, the rest to be ministers and chiefs. Then we must work on a framework of partnerships. When we engage with China, let's not just go there without an idea. Go to America, go to China with an idea of what you want from the arrangement. A framework for global partnerships. And also achieve Pan-African buy-in and ownership. The Africans on the continent must be on board. The Africans on the diaspora, in the Caribbeans, African Americans, and so on. Good old Pan-Africanism will help us in space. There are some African Americans who are in space. The continental integration agenda must involve the African diaspora. Then, of course, when we've done that, we come up with an implementation plan and then an implementation matrix. Then we have an inclusive management and governance structure. Then, more importantly, what is measured gets done. Monitoring, performance measurement, evaluation, and feedback. That's the framework of what the Africans must do before they engage the other players. Okay? We have a space program vision. We have a strategy to achieving that vision. Then execution, execution, execution. sequencing, prioritization, evaluation. This is the framework for the African. Let us sit together in the AU, in SADC, in COMESA to discuss this possibility and be clear about what we want done. Okay? We must have clear African ambitions that inform and determine the nature and content of the global partnerships. Do not just fit into the Chinese vision. Just fit into BR, which is the Belt and Road Initiative. React to the Belt and Road Initiative. Where is your own Belt and Road Initiative as an African? Before you talk about the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. That is the message today. Okay, and I won't go into the details of the ambitions, but I'll just list the ambitions. Ambition number 1, addressing our user needs. What are the problems that Africans want addressed? That's our first ambition. Harnessing the potential benefits of space science to addressing our economic challenges. And then you go to the details of that ambition. The quality of life must go up, the African capacity to manage the program, capacity to use the technologies, education on the programs, the tools, and so on. Okay? Ensure that we own the resources and we are able to deal with warning systems, extreme weather, climate, ecosystems, and so on and so forth. Okay? We go to ambition number 2, African access to space products and services. That's our ambition number 2, to strengthen the space mission on the continent and allow for optimal use of space-derived data, information, and services. Then you go into the details of that ambition. We want to avoid duplication. Nigeria is doing this, Algeria that, South Africa this. Why don't we coordinate and reduce unnecessary duplication? Allow technology transfer among ourselves, manage our IP rights. There's need for coordination on the continent. Okay? Use Pan-African institutions like the Pan-African University Space Institute and have centers of competence in Africa, centers of excellence, so that we avoid duplication and leverage our scale as Africans. Okay? We quickly go to number 3, developing the continental market for space science and technology. Okay? Again, we quickly go to ambition number 4, adopting good governance in the management of the African space program. The African must be organized. The African must have ambitions. The African must plan before they talk to China. Pan-African, inclusive bottom approach, independence of African space, funding. He who pays the piper calls the tune. Don't allow these donors, these do-gooders, to pay for our program. The African must pay for his space program. The African must pay for his economic development. Otherwise, if you don't pay for your development, someone will control your agenda. Even the Chinese, I mean, they are our friends, but they're business people. They're not Father Christmas, these ones. They're looking after their own interests. So the African must pay for his own economic development. The African must pay for the space program so that we can control the agenda. Africans must be the main funders of our program. That is a key agenda. We must educate the decision makers, the politicians, the public about the importance of space. Agenda number 5, coordination across the entire continent. To avoid duplication, we must share experiences across the continent. Promoting intra-Africa space collaboration and international relationships. These international relationships must be mutually beneficial. They must be equitable. We must be able to influence international agreements. So as the African Union, as SADC, we must be able to engage as equals with China, engage with the US in the same manner. Ambition number 7 is the most important, and I've already spoken to it. The space program must be driven by an integrated and united Africa approach. No bilateral deals. We want to unlock economies of scale and increase the impact of our program. No little deals between Algeria and China, Nigeria and China, South Africa and China. No, we don't want that. We're in the African Union to engage China so we can unlock scale, unleash better value from partnerships if we go as Africa. We must contextualize the program to our plans, the SADC industrialization strategy, the SADC infrastructure master plan, more importantly, the AU Agenda 2063. That is our Bible as Africans so far. What we want is in Agenda 2063. All our national programs, regional programs must come from the AU Agenda 2063. We are now talking about regional competitiveness, regional attractiveness, continental competitiveness. South Africa won't be attractive if Botswana is not attractive. South Africa won't be attractive if there's chaos in Zimbabwe. The region must be competitive. The region must be attractive. The African continent must be successful, must be competitive. We must think continent. You must be able to say, I'm an African first, a citizen of SADC second, South African third. Can you say that? I'm an African first, a citizen of SADC second, a Malawian third. De-emphasize the nation and put Africa up front. The African is not ready. Let me show you why I'm castigating the nation state. Look at Zimbabwe. GDP, $12 billion. Population, 30 million people. Chicken change. Little South Africa, what are the numbers? 55 million people. GDP, $300 billion. Nothing. Meaningless. Little Botswana, what are your numbers? 2.3 million people. GDP, $16 billion. Can you negotiate with China with those bad numbers? No, you can't. You win. That's why we don't want it. He likes it. We don't. Look at the numbers that make sense. SADC. Now we're talking, my brother. 280 million people. GDP, $600 billion. Now we are talking. The tripartite free trade area, SADC, COMESA, and EAC, 630 million people. Potential GDP, 1.3 trillion. Now, that is attractive to China, to India, to America. Those numbers make sense. They get better. Look at your numbers, my brother, Dr. Ming. Look at your numbers. 1.3 billion Chinese. GDP, $11 trillion. That's why you're successful. You're pooling as one. Economies of scale. Look at India. 1.2 billion people. GDP, $2.5 trillion. That's why India is boiling out of control. Look at the Americans. 325 million people. GDP, $19 trillion. Those are economies. Not Mickey Mouse Zimbabwe, Mickey Mouse South Africa, and Mickey Mouse Botswana. Now look at that one now. Here's the African now talking. The African has arrived. The African Continental Free Trade Area. The African Union. What are the numbers? 1.3 billion people. GDP, $2.3 trillion. Seriously? Can you imagine if we had to rock up and say, here I come, I'm the African. I speak on behalf of 1.3 billion people. I have a GDP behind me of $2.3 trillion. The Americans will talk to you not out of love, out of economics. The Chinese will listen. The Chinese, not out of love, out of economics. Africans, wake up. Those are the numbers that matter. 1.3 billion Africans with a GDP of $2.3. That's how we can unlock synergies and build an African space program. not as little South Africa, please. You are too small to be consequential. So keep your eyes on the prize. That's what we need to do, Africans. Keep your eyes on the prize. That's what we need to do as Africans. And when you look at our space program, there are several pillars. We need a vision, the space program vision. We need a policy framework for our space program. We need a strategy, the game plan to take us to the promised land of our space program. We need African buy-in, continental African buy-in, Pan-African buy-in. We need continental integration to take place. And of course, we need global partnerships with our friends from China, our friends from Europe, our friends from America. Of course, we need to monitor and evaluate. We need feedback. As you can see, the partnerships are just one element out of 6. We can't have effective global partnerships without continental integration, without a vision, without a policy framework, without a strategy, without Pan-African buy-in. We got to have the 3 pillars to achieve our strategy, our space program. But we can learn from China because they were poor like us once upon a time. They were not in space before, now they're in space. We can be in space just like them, but on our terms. I thank you so very much.
Wow. Wow. Please join me with another round of applause, please.